My wife used to believe that using our children like weapons would ensure her triumph in our divorce. She believed she could aim their affection for me directly at my own heart and pull the trigger. She never knew that her biggest error was not underestimating me, but underestimating the absolute intensity of a father's love. The Saturday air was heavy and sweet with the perfume of newly cut grass, which had always meant one thing in my adult life: contentment. It smelled like lazy weekends, neighborhood barbecues, and the simple joy of watching your kids be kids. From my vantage point on the sideline, a patch of grass worn down to mud by the restless pacing of countless parents before me, I watched my daughter, Maya, a 9-year-old firecracker with a ponytail that bounced with life of its own. Go! Maya! You've got this. Sweetheart! I yelled, my voice hoarse after an hour of such encouragement. She had the ball, a black and white blur, at her feet and was dancing it down the field towards the opposing goal. She moved quickly, a tornado of gangly limbs and unwavering drive. But then she paused. I noticed it in her small stuttering step and the short, anxious peek over her shoulder. It was a sliver of uncertainty, the sneaky little robber of childhood confidence. Don't worry about missing, I exclaimed, clamping my palms around my lips. I only care if you try. Simply give it your best shot. It felt as if my words were a physical force. Her shoulders tightened, her gaze focused, and she kicked. The ball soared in a lovely, arcing trajectory that just cleared the crossbar. A collective grumble echoed over the small cluster of parents on our side, but I didn't mind. Maya turned, her face flushed with effort, and met my gaze across the field. A dazzling, unfettered smile flashed across her face, capable of powering a whole city. I gave her a big thumbs up, and my grin felt like it was tearing my face in half. In that moment, the outcome was irrelevant. The effort, the try, the shared expression of pride between a father and his daughter, that was the entire cosmos. The cosmos used to be so complete and perfectly coordinated. I remembered a night not even a year ago that seems like a lifetime ago now. The golden, buttery light of our Westport, Connecticut kitchen, a space made for laughing, and the aroma of freshly baked cookies. I was sitting at the large wood table with our kid, Leo. At 14, he was in that awkward, lovely period between boyhood and manhood, with calm intensity and a mind that moved at breakneck speed. We were wrapping up his science project, a diorama of the solar system. My task was to hold the tiny planet stable while he applied glue drips with surgical accuracy. Dad, you said Saturn has 82 moons, he murmured, his brow wrinkled in concentration as he attempted to connect a tiny cotton ball moon to a painted styrofoam ring. That is insane. How can a single planet hold so many? The universe is full of surprises, buddy, I added just as Karen entered from the living room. She was carrying a tray of still warm chocolate chip cookies, and her smile was the focal point of our family's attention. Do my two favorite scientists need to refuel? She inquired, her voice a tune I knew I'd never tire of hearing. Mom and Dad claim Saturn has 82 moons. It's unbelievable, Leo exclaimed, his why palpable. I caught her eye above Leo's head and offered her a gentle wink. The universe is filled with surprises, son. Just like your mom. She chuckled, a genuine and warm sound that filled the room. She placed down the cookies and approached me from behind, placing her hands on my shoulders. I put my head back into her, a simple yet trusting gesture. Her fingertips kneaded the strain out of my neck. We were a team, a whole self-contained universe. I, Karen, Leo, and Maya. I sincerely believed that our love was the power that maintained everything in its orbit, binding us all together in a flawless, predictable dance. However, universes can collapse. Stars can burn out. Gravity can fail. My universe simply collapsed one day with no apocalyptic explosion. And now I was standing in the same house's living room, which had once echoed with laughing, but was now filled with the eerie silence of cardboard boxes and the sharp, chemical scent of packing tape. The warm, golden light had faded, replaced by the harsh, gray glare of a loveless afternoon. Karen stood across the room, arms crossed across her chest in a defensive posture. Her face, once the map of my universe, had become a chilly, distant terrain. You can't just walk away and expect everything to stay the same, David, she remarked, her voice tight and angry. You chose your job over this family. A familiar, useless aching surged through my temples. You understand that's not true, Karen? We tried. We. She cut in, her tone icy and surgical. No, David, you gave up on us. Now the kids and I have to learn to accept it. She referred to the kids with a subtle, proprietary accent, as if they were things she had acquired in a preliminary settlement. A chill ran down my spine, as slippery and cold as a snake. I was looking at a stranger, a beautiful, calculating stranger preparing for a war I had no idea we were fighting. Standing there in the rubble of our life together, I had no idea that the real war had only just begun. The first salvo was launched not in a lawyer's office, but in the gentle, deceiving silence of my daughter's bedroom. Karen later described the scenario to me in a therapy session with pompous pleasure as the epitome of parental affection. The soft glow of a unicorn nightlight created lengthy shadows on the wall. Karen sat on the edge of Maya's bed, the only sound being the repetitive pull of a brush through my daughter's long hair. They have been performing this routine since Maya was a toddler. A moment of connection and safety. Karen had weaponized it. Mommy. Maya's voice sounded small and drowsy. Do I have to visit Daddy's new place this weekend? I can imagine that pause. The measured exact beat of quiet before Karen responded. Her voice a masterclass in mild poison. Okay, honey, Daddy wants you to. I understand you don't want to go. I understand it makes you sad to leave our house. Another pause, allowing the words to sink in. He probably doesn't realize how much it bothers you. Sometimes grown-ups get selfish, baby. They just consider what they desire. A seed of mistrust was planted in the most fertile soil possible. Doesn't Daddy love us anymore? Maya's voice was a low, sorrowful whisper. Then came the masterstroke. Karen drew her into a hug, stroking her hair, her voice now a whispered murmur in Maya's ears. Oh no, sweetheart. Of course, he loves you. He expresses himself differently now. It's okay. You and I have to stick together, right? We have to protect each other. Protect each other. For me. When I arrived on Saturday, my own heart was a clumsy, eager balloon. I'd spent the week transforming a bland, two-bedroom flat into something I thought they would consider an adventure. I'd bought a new video game for Leo and a huge, fluffy beanbag chair for Maya in the exact garish hue of pink she preferred. I was virtually jumping on the balls of my feet as I walked up the familiar stone path to the front door, holding a small cooler with 2 pints of their favorite ice cream, mint chocolate chip for Leo and cookie duff for Maya. A peace offering, a sign of normalcy. Karen opened the door before I could ring the doorbell. She had a look of strained pity on her face, which set my teeth on edge. Leo stood behind her, shoulders down, and his gaze concentrated on a spot on the floor to my left. Maya, my tiny girl, crouched beneath Karen's legs, looking out with one scared eye. Hello, champions. Are you ready for a weekend of fun? I tried to convey a level of enthusiasm in my voice that I didn't feel. The hopeful balloon in my chest was quickly collapsing. I don't want to go, Maya said quietly, her voice muffled by the fabric of her mother's pants. I want to stay home with Mommy. The words struck me with the visceral power of a punch in the gut. My lungs emptied completely. I gazed at Karen, my eyes imploring for assistance, an explanation, and a sign that she would resolve this. She only gave me a little, pathetic shrug, a sign of sheer, theatrical helplessness. She's not feeling well, David. She explained, her voice loud enough for the children to hear. Maybe you should just leave. Let's not make this any tougher than it has to be. Who is it harder for? I ignored her. I crouched, lowering myself to Maya's level. Her strawberry shampoo smelled so familiar, it made my heart ache. Maya, baby, what is wrong? I questioned, my voice gentle. Can you speak to Daddy? She simply shook her head, tears welling up in her large brown eyes, and buried her face totally in her mother's knee. She was trembling. Leo remained a statue chiseled from adolescent apathy. But as I looked up at him, I noticed at it a spark of hatred, of confused, second-hand wrath pointed clearly at me. He looked at me as if I were the cause of his sister's distress. Karen had, in a manner, made sure I was. I drove away from my own house that day, feeling like a ghost. The 2 pints of ice cream lay melting on the passenger seat, a sweet, sticky reminder of my failure. Back in my apartment, stillness was a living thing. It was suffocating. The beanbag chair in the corner seemed obscenely happy. I sat on the cheap, uncomfortable sofa, the melting ice cream now a pool on the kitchen counter, staring at the empty place where my children should have been. This was it. This was the bottom. She wasn't simply divorcing me. She was deleting me. The wrath came first, a searing, white wave that made my palms shiver. I wanted to contact my lawyer, Tom. I wanted to scream about parental alienation and demand an emergency court order. I imagined a courtroom with Karen on the stand, her lies revealed for all to see. I envisaged a court granting me complete custody as a joyful, vindicated hero. But then another vision emerged in my thoughts, colder and more scary. I spotted Leo and Maya, not in my apartment, laughing, but in a sterile office, facing a court-appointed psychologist. I witnessed them being asked questions that no child should ever have to answer. Who would you like to live with? Does your mother ever say negative things about your father? How do you feel when your parents fight? They'd be forced to choose. To put a name to their devotion. That would do far more psychological harm than anything Karen could say about me. The system, the very institution created to administer justice, was a blunt, clumsy tool. It couldn't mend a shattered heart, and it would completely destroy the precious souls of my children. I was imprisoned. Every usual path resulted in a terrible outcome for them. Fighting her in court would put them in the crosshairs. Doing nothing meant allowing her to gradually, deliberately break my connection to them, until I was nothing more than a name on a child support check. I sank forward, my head in my hands, the silence of the empty flat closing in on me. She had me cornered. Normal justice was a losing game. I needed a different approach to play. A week later, I was seated in a Starbucks that smelled like burned coffee and corporate sadness. It was neutral ground where we now gathered to exchange documents and somber niceties. Karen arrived 10 minutes late, as she usually does. She walked in with false apologies and the aroma of costly perfume, and sat opposite me without making eye contact. I have a conference call at 20. She replied, taking a file from her leather tote bag. Her phone vibrated as she did so. She looked at the TV and her whole manner softened. The harsh, business-like ad vanished, giving way to a bright maternal radiance. Leo! Hi, honey, she said softly into the phone. How was school? Don't worry about the history test. You simply do your best, that is all that matters. Mommy is always proud of you. Tonight, I'll bake your favorite lasagna. You do not have to consume the fast food from your father's house. I love you too, honey. So much. She hung up and glanced at me, her expression flat and indifferent. She slid the document across the table. The children need stability, David. You understand. And that was all. That was when the universe within my head changed on its axis. My anguish and despair cleared away, leaving a frigid, diamond-hard clarity. She was performing. Her chat with Leo was not just for him, but also for me. It was a show of her strength, a nonchalant flex of her authority over their feelings. See, I am the nurturer. I am the home. You are the anomaly, the weekend distraction, the junk food vendor. However, she made an error in her calculations. She believed she was demonstrating her strength, but what she actually showed me was her playbook. And her greatest vulnerability, her hubris. Her unwavering belief that she was in complete control and that her machinations were invisible. I was not going to fight her with her weapons. I would never resort to whispering my own poisons into our children's ears. That would make me no better than her, and it would just drive them apart more. No, I was not going to fight with her. I was prepared to battle for them. My idea would not involve a bomb aimed for mutual devastation. That would be a mirror. I would force her to stare into this finely polished, brutally honest mirror. The next day, during my lunch break, I went into an unassuming electronics store. I felt like a spy in a cheap movie as I examined the gadget shelves. I found just what I was seeking: forgo, a digital voice recorder the size of a USB flash drive. It was compact and unobtrusive, having a single button for activation. It cost $49, the best investment I've ever made. The metamorphosis did not occur instantly. It was a slow, purposeful reset of my soul. The hurt and despair remained, but now they served as fuel rather than ballast. I stopped reacting and began observing. I became a student of my own sorrow. I spent my nights not wallowing in self-pity, but reading books and articles about child psychology, particularly parental alienation syndrome. The term itself was a revelation, putting a name to the insidious evil I was fighting. I wasn't looking for ammunition. I wanted to comprehend. Before I could find an antidote, I needed to understand how the poison worked. The strategy was straightforward to execute, but it needed a level of patience I had no idea I possessed. Every drop-off, pickup, and brief, stilted discussion on the front porch was an intelligence collection mission. Before I got out of my car, I'd reach inside my jacket pocket and feel the chilly metal of the recorder. A small click caused the little red light to flicker once before going dark. The device was on, a silent witness in my pocket. The first time I listened to a recording, I had to pull over to the side of the road. I'd just dropped the kids off after a stressful, mostly silent Sunday afternoon. I placed the recorder into my car's USB port, inserted my earbuds, and hit play. Her syrupy sweet voice entered my ears, laced with steel. Remember, Leo, if anyone from the court asks, just say you want to stay with Mom. It will make things significantly easier for everyone. Your father will be all right. He has a major important job to keep him busy. Leah's voice was tiny and resigned. Yes, Mom. I closed my eyes, feeling nauseous. Every syllable was a new cut, but it was also evidence. Not for a court, but for the mirror. The hardest part was keeping my cool. I had to be a stone wall, showing no emotion as she delivered her subtle jabs and loaded words directly in front of me. I had to smile and wish her a nice week as the secret device in my pocket recorded the poison she was pouring into our children's life as soon as I turned my back. There was a close call in which the entire organization almost came crashing down. I was dropping off Maya after we had spent the afternoon at the park. For the first time in weeks, I had a glimpse of the old her. We had laughed. She had held my hand without flinching. As I knelt on the front step to hug her farewell, my heart felt lighter than it had in months. I said, "I love you, princess," into her hair. She hugged me tight and put her small palm against my jacket, just over my pocket. She remained still. "What's in your pocket, Daddy?" It is challenging. My blood became chilly. My heart pounded against my ribs, like a caged bird. For a single second, my thoughts became a blank wall of panic. I carefully pulled away from the hug, attempting a nonchalant laugh that sounded brittle and artificial even to my own ears. "Oh, that's just my new keychain, sweetie," I explained, thinking quickly. "It's slightly bigger than the last one. Go inside now, it's getting cold." She gazed at me for a moment, her brow wrinkled, before shrugging and running inside. I stood there, my legs feeling like jelly, until the door closed. I exhaled a breath I had not aware I was holding. This war demanded precise accuracy. I'd lose everything if I made one mistake or acted carelessly. 2 months. I spent 2 painful months gathering my evidence. I organized the recordings, naming each one by date and location. Listening to them was an act of self-torture. Karen mentioned to Maya that my new flat was probably lonely and gloomy. I overheard her telling Leo that I was probably too busy at work to help him with his complex math homework, but she would always make time. I heard her justifying every decision, every schedule difficulty, as the product of my selfishness and her sacrifice. It was a masterpiece of psychological warfare directed at our own children's hearts. Finally, I had everything I needed. Not an overpowering mound of evidence, but a well-curated selection of her best works. A 5-minute audio recording that captured the spirit of her campaign in its most powerful, unmistakable form. I texted her, "We should talk. It's just us." About the children. It's important. She recommended the same soulless Starbucks, but I declined. I chose a quiet, dimly lit cafe downtown with comfortable chairs and subdued tones where people didn't make a fuss. I needed a peaceful, regulated setting. She arrived with her customary distant superiority, checking her watch before sitting down. She was plainly expecting a meeting of supplication. I intended to beg for extra time or whine about a schedule change. She was prepared to be magnanimous in her refusal. "I have only 15 minutes, David." "What makes this so important?" she asked, not bothering to remove her outerwear. I didn't say anything. I dug into my purse and took out my phone and a set of white wireless earbuds. I moved one of them across the smooth, dark wood of the table, stopping exactly in front of her. "Put this in," I said quietly and steadily. "And listen." She smirked, a slight, condescending twist of her lips. "Is this some kind of game?" 5 minutes. Karen, I replied without blinking. The amusement in my eyes had vanished, replaced by something she hadn't seen in a long time. "This is for our children. Give me 5 minutes." Something about my tone, a finality she couldn't quite pinpoint, must have sparked her interest. With a theatrical sigh of frustration, she picked up the earphone and inserted it into her ear. I looked down at my phone, my thumb hovering above the screen. I took a deep breath and hit play. My mind's camera focused on her face. For the first several seconds, there was only arrogant boredom, then a flash of perplexity, a little furrow on her forehead as she recognized the first sound, her own voice dripping with fake worry. Karen's recorded one. Daddy probably doesn't realize how much it upsets you to leave our home. Her head tilted slightly. Her eyes, which had been searching the caffin, were now fixed on the tabletop. Karen's recording 2G. You don't have to consume fast food from your father's place. Mommy will make the lasagna you love. Her expression turned from confusion to disbelief. She recognized the words and times. She took a fast, piercing look at me. I simply stared back, my face expressionless. Karen recording 302. If anyone from the court asks, you simply say you want to stay with Mom. This will make things much easier. The terror began to awaken. Her mouth dropped slightly open. The polished veneer of the confident, in-control ex-wife was shattering right in front of my eyes. She was hearing her own premeditated cruelty, devoid of context and rationale, played back with high fidelity. Then came the last shattering blow. Mawai recorded 4 with a little, what sob doesn't daddy love us anymore. A muscle in Karen's jaw twitched. I noticed her swallow hard. Karen's tape 4, her voice a sneaky, poisonous whisper. Oh no, dear. We have to stick together, right? Must safeguard one another. The transformation was completed. The hubris was gone. The bewilderment was gone. They were replaced with the cold, pale horror of being apprehended. Absolutely and thoroughly captured. Her cheeks lost their color, leaving her complexion pale and horribly white. She yanked the earpiece out as if it had burned her hand quivering slightly as she set it down on the table. Her wide, terrified eyes finally found mine. You recorded me, she whispered, her voice hoarse from shock. Are you planning to take this to court? Are you attempting to take my children away from me? The dread in her voice was genuine. The fear of losing control, of having her perfect image ruined, was tangible. For a brief moment, I experienced a flush of triumphant satisfaction, but it rapidly went, leaving to profound and terrible grief. I slowly shook my head. This isn't for a judge, Karen. I whispered, barely audible, but it seemed to cover the entire space between us. This is for you. This was so you could finally hear what you were doing to our kids. My voice was not angry. There's no, I told you so, only the awareness of recent months. I will never let them hear this, I said, keeping my voice steady. I will never tell them that their mother attempted to convert them into ammunition. I am going to erase this. All of it. On one condition. She stared at me, holding her breath, like a cornered animal waiting for the ultimate blow. It stops, I said. All of it. Whispers, lies, and manipulation. It finishes tonight, and you and I are going to start co-parenting therapy. Together, we're going to learn how to be parents again. Not as husband and wife, but as two people who adore their children more than they dislike each other. The silence that followed lasted a lifetime. The threat was not legal, but moral. It wasn't about custody, but about character. The raw, unadulterated shame of her own deeds, mixed with the astounding awareness that I had the ability to completely ruin her name, but choose not to, was more powerful than any judge's gavel. Finally, she broke. Her shoulders fell with defeat. A single tear rolled down her cheek, then another. These were not the tears of clever manipulation that I had grown accustomed to. They were bitter, scorching tears of complete failure and deep shame. She nodded, unable to respond, and with that mute, defeated gesture, the conflict ended. The subsequent months were difficult. There was no magical reconciliation or romantic movie montage in which all of our issues faded away. There was only the lengthy, arduous process of rebuilding. Our initial appointments with Dr. Albright, the family therapist, were agonizing. The atmosphere was filled with tension and implicit hostility. Karen was defensive and quiet, whilst I was apprehensive and guarded. But the power dynamic had fundamentally changed. Her primary weapon, manipulation, had been eliminated. She couldn't lie or perform for me anymore since we both knew I'd heard the truth. She was forced, for the first time, to face the repercussions of her own actions. We slowly and painstakingly learned to speak. This is not about our failing marriage, but about logistics. Discussing holiday plans, parent-teacher conferences, and Maya's soccer schedule. We learned to communicate in the clipped, professional, yet quarters tone of two business partners whose shared goal was their children's well-being. It was not warm, but it was no longer a combat zone. For the youngsters, that tenuous tranquility meant everything. They changed gradually but undeniably. Maya stopped clinging to her mother's leg during drop-off. She began sprinting to my car, anxious to tell me about her day. The light returned to her eyes. Leo was a tougher nut to crack. The wall of teenage resentment he'd built was thick, but I could see fractures developing. He started asking me for help with his homework again. When I dropped him off at home, he'd stay for a few minutes to finish telling me a story. We were healing. One crisp fall afternoon, some 6 months after the cafe encounter, Lee and I were at the park, tossing a football back and forth. The furious, confused youngster who had stared at me from behind his mother's shoulder had vanished. My kid took his place, his face relaxed, a real smile on his lips as he easily caught a long pass. "Nice throw, Dad," he remarked, jogging back to me. "Nice catch," I commented, ruffling his hair. We sat down on an old wooden bench, the peaceful stillness of a shared activity settling in between us. After a minute, Leo shifted with a serious expression on his face. He took out his phone and swiped over the screen for an unknown reason. "Dag," he began hesitantly. "I need to show you something." He angled the phone towards me. He had an audio recording application open. The screen displayed a list of files. When I read the names, my blood ran cold. Momok Ju 3, Momok 12, and Mom Nog 5. I knew what she was saying, he said, his gaze locked on the television. "Overheard her on the phone with her pals discussing you. I overheard what she would say to Maya when she thought I wasn't listening, so I started recording her." He glanced up at me, and in his eyes, I saw a load that no 14-year-old should have to bear. "I was going to give them to you," he explained, his voice quiet but forceful. "So you could win. So you could show the judge what she was truly like." I was struck into silence. My son. My quiet, attentive son has been fighting his own private war. He had attempted to protect me. "Why do you tell me this now, Leo?" I eventually managed to question, my voice husky with a feeling I couldn't identify. It was a combination of terror and enormous, heart-stopping pride. "Because you didn't use it," he answered, his stare direct and full of wisdom that belied his age. "That night, after you met her in the coffee shop, she got home and grieved for a long time. But after that, she began to alter. She stopped saying terrible things. Ship was different." He paused to take a breath. "You had the proof. You could have ruined her, but you didn't. You choose to try to fix things instead. For us," he looked directly into my eyes, and the final piece of the wall between us crumbled. "I realized," he answered clearly and firmly, "that winning isn't the most important thing." And then, as I watched, my heart was in my throat. Leo chose all of the files from his phone. A prompt displayed on the screen. "Are you certain you want to permanently delete these items?" His thumb moved without hesitation. He pushed yes. The screen went blank for a moment, and the files vanished into thin air as if they had never existed. They say that revenge is best served cold. But I discovered that ultimate victory does not involve serving that meal at all. It is the act of walking away from the table. It is about ending the cycle of hatred so that the following generation does not have to experience the sour taste of that cold, lonely supper. My son did not need me to win a battle for him. He needed me to teach him how to declare peace. And in his modest, profound act of deletion, he demonstrated that he had learnt the lesson correctly.